when you feel like falling over. Just let me in your head so I can be there for you, there for you. The night is young, won't you sing for me? Won't you sing for me? Till we fall asleep.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to VC Masters. I'm Nick Pallavito. I'll be your moderator for today's show. And today we're going to have a really exciting show because we're bringing one of our special guests that you may have seen on the Pod TV network, Shakeel Latimer. Now, if people don't know who he is, he's the guy that won the $1 million play with the dogs down in Australia. But he's done more than that. He's invested in movies. He's done currency trading. He does investments. Matter of fact, there's very little that he doesn't do, which is quite shocking. And he picked up the tab at the French Laundry. A lot of people don't know what the French Laundry is, but if you live in the San Francisco Bay Area, it's a kind of an elite restaurant outside the Bay Area, and frankly, it's also very expensive. But I'm not going to be the one who's going to be interviewing him. Instead, we have a professor at Duke University, and we're going to bring him on right now, who's a professor at business, Salman Azhar. Salman, welcome to the VC Masters. This is going to be a very exciting interview, assuming Shaq wakes up from the major medication that he might be on due to like operations, which what happens when things take place. But Shakeel's a pretty much of a character. He actually invests in radio, television, movies, dogs. I mean, the world seems to be his oyster, and he travels the entire world. So with that, we're going to bring in my good friend from Sydney, Australia, Shakeel Latimer, who is the voice of reason down in Australia and does a lot of work all over the world. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Azhar, to meet with Shakeel Latimer.
Well, Shakeel, it's wonderful having you. And this is the first time we have met, but I have already seen a lot of videos from you about free speech, investing, and almost everything. So Mr. Pallavito is absolutely right that you have done a little bit of everything. So let's start with what's your real passion? What do you really enjoy doing?
I don't know anymore because I've done so many things. I'll just start off with, I apologize if I'm a little bit lethargic. I've been quite unwell, so I'm quite heavily medicated at the moment. So please forgive me if I ramble a little bit. Look, I had always been very interested in the markets, in trading the markets. So, as a kid watching, the footage of the New York Stock Exchange with all these guys in their really colourful jackets and bits of paper flying everywhere, and it just looked very chaotic and very exciting. And I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. Of course, the Sydney Futures Exchange closed when I was 15 or 16. And the London open pits in London closed when I was in my early 20s. So I've actually never been on a trading floor. Never had the chance to actually to be there. I've had very good friends of mine in Chicago that said that they would let me come onto the floor and put a trade on so I can do the hand signals and all of that. But yeah, I think my passion was that, probably for the wrong reasons. I just wanted to make a lot of money. And Nick's talked about me getting involved in a whole heap of other things, which, to be honest with you, with few exceptions, is really quite idiotic. I don't recommend that people do that. I actually don't suggest that you go off and start getting involved in a whole heap of things that you don't know anything about. And I think that financially I would have been better off not doing that, with the exception of my investments into horses and greyhounds. But that was already an interest of mine anyway. So, but yeah, I suggest that people stick to what they know and expand rather than doing what I did and, making gazillions of dollars in the markets, then going and producing movies in Hollywood and, setting up radio stations in Australia and buying FM frequencies and, trying to get books published and, all the different things that I've done. I've run a concrete and earth moving company, run a media company and newspaper and all this sort of stuff. It just makes no sense.
So totally get it, but you had more fun if you were just doing one thing, and fun has a certain value. It is one of the major returns on investment, in my opinion, at least. So tell me, what do you hate doing? I mean, we all have like jobs, and we all have things that we do, investment we make. What do you hate doing?
Paperwork and compliance. So anybody who's watched me on any podcast or any television appearance will always hear me talking about lowering taxes and my preference for indirect taxation. It's not because I want to pay less tax. That's not what I'm actually. I mean, we all want to pay less tax, but that's not my motivation. I don't want to have to fill out a bloody financial report or a tax return. I don't want to have to keep records of everything that I'm doing. And I know that that's a weak spot for me. And I think that anybody who knows me knows that I'm really, really weak when it comes to keeping things in order. So I have to make up for that somehow. And make up for that is, one, I employ people, employ accountants and lawyers to look after stuff. But two, I've got business partners that actually understand what I'm doing. So especially when I'm trading the markets, pretty important that you know what your trades are and what adjustments you've made to those positions, because you might hold a position for a couple of years. I generally don't like doing that. I generally like to only hold my position for a day or two. But sometimes the position just goes wrong. And you need to have a clear record of what you've done with that position over that period of time. So I have to make up my weak spots by having other people involved.
Have you found anybody that enjoys doing compliance work?
I wouldn't say that I've found people that enjoy compliance work. I think I've found people who have a knack for compliance work. I have found people that enjoy organizing things and keeping records of things. Compliance, I don't know. If you enjoy compliance, there's something wrong with you, in my personal opinion.
Exactly. Yeah, I haven't found somebody. If you know somebody, I would love doing that, because I'm pretty sure that that's what anybody that's creative like you would not enjoy compliance, because you want to kind of like I've seen your YouTube videos and stuff, and you're fairly kind of like sharp and like quick and all that stuff, and compliance is like completely the opposite skill set, which is like you have to really kind of do boring stuff. And
well, that's right. I mean, look, I own the greyhounds and the horses, and at one point I think I had 80 greyhounds or something, and there's no way I'm keeping records of all that. So I used to pay my trainers extra to keep a record of what the hell was going on with these greyhounds. And obviously the racing regulator and the animal welfare people, obviously they have to do certain checks, and they have to know when where the greyhound is and what's happening with that greyhound and what its health is like, and all that sort of stuff. Whereas for me, I was just being the Australian larrikin. I came back from LA, of all places. I was in LA when COVID hit, and I was watching on the news, and it was showing that in Australia they were running out of toilet paper, they were running out of bottled water. I'd actually sent some stuff from California to Australia to help out friends and family. And
so you sent toilet paper from California to Australia?
I did. I sent toilet paper from California. I was staying in Marina Del Rey, and we're sort of loading up on all this stuff. And a very good friend of mine in Vegas said, "Look, why don't you come over here, because we don't know what's happening. Is the world going to end? You can come over here, and we'll enjoy each other's company while the world burns." And I said, "Well, it's not that bad yet. America seems to be okay. Maybe it's best I just hang out here." And I had about, because I entered on an ESTA, so I think I had about 7 weeks left, 6 or 7 weeks left on my ESTA before I'd have to leave. So I thought I'll just wait till things calm down. And 2 days later, 2 or 3 days later, Governor Newsom had a shelter-in-place order. And we're staying at an Airbnb, and of course I went to the local grocery store, the Whole Foods that I was normally buying stuff from, and the shelves were empty. There was no water, there was no toilet paper, and I thought, gee, I wish I had sent it all back to Australia. But of course I've then jumped on a Qantas flight from LA back to Sydney, gone into what was, thankfully, it was an investment property that we have, which was empty at the time that had just finished being built, and temporarily moved in here because we thought COVID, still virus, not going to last that long. And of course, I'm sitting around bored, stuck at home. I can't travel. I can't go anywhere. And I bought the Greyhound. So, that's just luck. And also because I had some interest in Greyhounds. So it's not like a lot of people come to me like, oh, well, tell us about Greyhounds. Like, how do we pick a winning Greyhound? I don't know. I bought a heap of Greyhounds. I spent a few $100,000 buying Greyhounds just as a laugh, as something to kind of do. And I've got the check that Nick, if Nick wants to come back on, Nick always loves it when I bring the check out. Oh, I better turn my screen off.
Just a minute, we got to take a really good look at that check. See that's one thing is that whoa, you went off.
Yeah, I think I have to change. There's
it's a little bit blurred, so we can't really see.
Closer to you, Shaq. Move the check closer to you. There we go. See, that's the part I like about business. You see that? That's a $1 million check, Dr. Azar. And that's the beauty of business, because only in our world of Pod TV, you can run across a guy like Shakeel, who actually buys the horse and buys the dog, and the dog wins $1 million for Shaq. You can't make this stuff up. But of course, petty change.
It was 6 weeks later, and it was one of those things that, because that year, I'd come back here in, I think, March, and that year New South Wales had been relatively okay. We'd seen the lockdowns in Victoria and some of the other states, and then all of a sudden the Delta variant came out, and we're all locked down, and we're all sort of, stuck, and we were only just able to get out off the house when I bought that Greyhound, and I bought his brother as well. And I remember watching the Greyhound race at a different track, and I thought, yeah, this Greyhound's, I've made a mistake here. This one's going to go nowhere. And I was so disappointed. Of course, when he actually qualified, again, being the clown, disorganized person that I am, everyone was cheering when he qualified for the $1 million chase, and I didn't actually realize that he qualified. So people around me like, what's wrong with you? Why are you so calm about this? So, and of course, his brother, who I thought was going to win it, didn't qualify at all.
Yeah. Now, Shaq, you also travel, and you have a story about the French Laundry. And I think it's kind of a great story because you actually had a chance to go eat there. Tell me, how do you land in the French Laundry, which is, for people who don't know, it's a great restaurant outside of the San Francisco Bay Area, but it's not cheap, is it? What's your story?
It's not cheap. I think though the restaurant you're referring to, I think you're talking about the one where I spent the same as Governor Newsom. I spent about $15,000 there, but that was a different restaurant. I think that was in San Francisco. But look, I do like good food. I try not to spend that sort of money too frequently.
Okay, just so I'm clear, you spent $15,000 on dinner.
Well, there was seven of us or 8 of us, so it's a couple of grand.
Did you pick up the tab?
I picked up the tab that day. But
you're the guy I should go out to dinner with, because you'll pick up the tab up to $15,000, right?
Not always.
Nick takes us to Washington Duquesne, which is a pretty nice restaurant. But I think the tab there is like hundreds of dollars, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm cheap.
Nick picks it up.
Dr. Zar, I'm a cheap guy. I'm not like Shakeel, because I haven't got a $15,000 bill yet from the Washington.
It is, as I said, it is unusual for me to pick up a tab as much as that. I was doing a business deal at the time, and the business deal became successful, and it was like a celebratory dinner, and most of that's on wine. You don't spend that much on food. But yeah, I do have a few receipts which I've held up before of different restaurants I've been to, and I've had the bills up around there. But I have to say that in America, and I hate to say it because I'm always so reluctant to say anything negative about the United States, because I love and respect the country so much. But for me, I'm not known as being a fussy eater unless I'm in America. When I'm in America, my American friends are like, "Oh my goodness, you're so fussy." And I don't know how to politely put it, but the food in America sucks. It's just It's not what it is. So, yeah, so I mean, like when you go to in North Carolina, I've been to Golden Corral, I think it is.
Golden Corral.
Yeah. I think we should do better than Golden Corral next time you're here.
Yeah,
Actually, I recorded in North Carolina.
I've been there 3 times, but I can't do it. But even some of the cafes and smaller restaurants that you go to that ordinarily I like to support small businesses, and I end up just getting really frustrated at the difference in quality of food. I think that Americans are used to that I'm not used to. So I end up having to go to restaurants that are a bit more expensive, and then everyone in America thinks I'm a snob. But really, I'm only, even at say like the more expensive restaurants of America, you're basically paying what you would pay in Australia for the same quality if you were to go to a similar restaurant. So,
right. So, Shakeel, another thing when it comes to staying at hotel rooms, because I know you've traveled around the world, and usually when I travel, I have my resistance point around $400 to $500 a night, and then I go, I can't imagine that. Have you ever spent more than $500 a night on a hotel room? What's the most you've ever spent on a hotel room when you travel?
You're going to make me look like such an outrageous person online. No, we got a presidential suite a couple of times in London and in the Maldives. So that was one was 10,000 US a night. I think the other one was 15. No, the other one was 12. I think US. But I've been lucky enough that in a lot of the hotels, like the Hilton Park Lane in London, I normally get upgraded because of my status with Hilton. So I get upgraded into the presidential suite, which is fantastic when you're there by yourself and you've got a 14-person dining room. It's a nice feeling nonetheless.
Right. So your resistance level isn't 500 a night; it's like 14,000 a night.
Well, again, it would have to be a special occasion. Okay. If
I understand.
If I meet a nice girl and decide that I'm going to get married and something, that the honeymoon's going to be in a pretty expensive hotel room, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So tell me a little bit about your currency trading, because I understand you do a lot of currency trading, and there's lots of interesting things going on in the currency market with BRICS and US dollar and all these alternative kind of cryptocurrencies and so on. Tell me what your thoughts are on that, and what are you trading these days?
I haven't really had a great look at crypto. I'm just beginning to learn about crypto now. I was very resistant to crypto. I sort of share Warren Buffett's view and the view of the Bank of International Settlements that says we can't understand what problem crypto is solving. And for a large part, I still kind of agree with that. But I am beginning to have a look at that. As for currency trading, I really treat it like trading anything else, whether it be commodity products, whether it be shares, futures contracts, whatever it is. I treat it pretty much the same. So I do tend, with my FX trading, to trade it over longer time horizons because I think it makes more sense. The US dollar, euro, when the Russia-Ukraine conflict first broke out, the euro fell to parity with the US dollar. Now, to me, that was a really obvious trade, that although Europe was going to have some issues, it was never going to stay there for very long. So that was a position that I put on. And I think I got out of that around the $1.08, $1.09 mark. I thought it was going to continue going higher, but I was happy to have made that 8 or 9%, return. And of course, I've leveraged into the position, so it was a nice position. The Australian New Zealand dollar is a great pair. Now, the reason why it's such a great pair for me is because you're not going to meet anyone in America who trades the Aussie New Zealand dollar pair. Well, why would they? That's not a pair that they're used to. We are. So I know when the New Zealand dollar is getting a little bit too high or when it's getting a little bit too low. So just recently it was $1.15 against the Aussie. So that was too low for the New Zealand dollar because the Australian economy wasn't traveling as well as it should to justify that price. But go back a few years, and it was sitting there at $1.01, which is way too high. And of course, you can anticipate that you're going to see the government intervene. So for New Zealand, for example, most of the tourism dollars come from Australia. Obviously, we're only a few hours away from New Zealand. I'm in Sydney at the moment. It's quicker for me to fly to New Zealand, which is another country, than it is for me to fly to the state that I was born in Western Australia. So New Zealand relies on Australian tourist dollars. And so if their currency becomes too high, then Australians all of a sudden start saying, well, maybe I'll go to Thailand or Bali or Singapore or America or Europe instead of going to New Zealand. And so there's going to be some intervention there. And of course there was. And you saw a drop from $1.01 to, $1.07, $1.08, $1.09, $1.10. So I think that these things are predictable. I think the biggest problem that people have being traders is perhaps boredom. For me, that's one of the things that's boredom. You put your trade on and you just sort of sit around and you've got nothing to do, so you go traveling and buying racehorses.
Yeah, so I have never really gotten into currency trading because me, as a VC, I'm looking for things where that develop value and add value, whereas currency I see just as an arbitrage. And maybe I'm wrong. Tell me if that's the right way to look at it, or is it different?
Well, it's not necessarily an arbitrage. It's not necessarily an arbitrage, but you might see some arbs in the crypto market. Look, I think from a VC perspective, because I've been looking into crypto so much, I'm not going to profess that I'm an expert in the field, but the demise of FTX, I think, was enormously damaging. One of the things that FTX was doing or was about to do was the tokenization of shares. I think that would have real potential. And you're even seeing BlackRock and JP Morgan and big financial groups like that are talking about that. So I think the tokenization of real world assets, and especially stocks and commodity products, are going to be a good idea. As far as FX, look, I think you can take reasonable guesses and reasonable bets on where the economy of a country is going to go. And if you're talking about the major currencies, if you're not talking about emerging markets, but you're talking about the major currencies of the world, established sort of legacy countries, their markets are cyclical. The Australian market has had a rough handful of years. It will recover. But during the Great Recession, Australia boomed because of our mineral resources. We're beginning to see China now improve its economy and start to buy more from Australia. So we're beginning to see the Australian economy pick up as a result of that. So if you see that the dollar's low and interest rates are a little bit higher than normal, you can deduct from that that's not going to happen forever. And also, without talking about who's right and who's wrong in politics, generally speaking, if the economic conditions of a country deteriorate for too long, the people will vote that party out and vote another party in. And whether that new party does anything positive or not is irrelevant. It's the immediate reaction that the market has. And the immediate reaction often is when there's a change of government, the markets will briefly, at very least, pop up. So I think that makes sense. I think when it comes to investing, you look at the stock market itself, you look at the commodity markets, you will see some sector rotation. So you will see that when the markets are a bit depressed, people start going into commodity products. When the markets are flying, people drop the commodity products, they start going into the markets, and then they start going into more of the tech-heavy, higher risk, higher volatility things. So, I mean, that's trading the markets. But as I said, as far as running a business is concerned, I think it's very important for people to stick to what they know and get the right people around them. Because if you make the mistake that I make, which is because I'm a macro trader, so I trade all over the world, and I'm an absolute, but when I ran a fund, it was an absolute return fund. What that means is that I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at the property sector. I'm looking at, all of the different economic factors within a country. And then all of a sudden I want to participate. So I go, wouldn't it be great if I went and bought a shopping centre in the middle of, Fiji? No, that's a bad idea. I don't know anything about running a shopping centre. So as long as you're investing your money in places where you know, and there's a reason for investing there. But otherwise, it's fraud in nature.
Makes sense. So what kind of a return is a good return in currency market if you look at annualized returns, for example?
I think that's a very hard question to answer. It depends on.
Well, let's rephrase that question. What is your return in a good year, and what is your return on a bad year?
So, look, I generally, when I'm trading on behalf of clients, I generally will return somewhere in the 20 to 30% range, and I've been able to sustain that for a reasonable length of time, which makes me, an exceptional trader. I don't know why, but the markets, they like there to be very little risk, and returns of that sort of level I consider to be reasonably impressive. For my own personal account, I'd be pretty annoyed if that's all I made, but obviously I don't have the same fiduciary responsibility to myself as I do to my clients, so I'm allowed to exceed normal risk levels. So I've had extraordinary returns. In 2020, I made for myself, my personal account, just a handful of people that are involved personally with me, we made over 900% in 3 or 4 months. But that is obviously an aberrant situation, and hopefully a once in a lifetime event, because the US market crashed and then came flying back up again because of COVID. And I hope that never repeats itself. But generally speaking, I do target a much higher return than that. But again, I'm awake, 24/7 with my phone and my my laptop and everything on alert, so that if something goes off in the market, I can get out of bed and go and manage it. So it's not like I'm making those sorts of returns passively. You have to be really actively involved in the market to do that.
Got it. So in VC industry, I can tell you that like in a good company, the best I have done is done 171x return. And in a bad company or a business that has gone belly up, it is 0x. So it is a very easy, there's always like the bottom is 0 return. So it's almost like in the VC industry, you're looking not to make mistakes. And the mistake is not investing in a company that is going to go 171x. So my worst investment decision was Google, because I didn't buy it at the right time. Your losses are always capped at 0x, that you will lose everything, but the upside is basically tremendous. So we are basically willing to, lose quite a few companies in order to get that 171x in early stage. In later stage, we are looking at something like 5x to 6x return, where we generally are relatively sure that there's going to be an exit and we're not going to lose all our money. And if we do lose some of our money, we at least, if we do lose out, we at least get our original investment back. And there's like this funny thing about downside protection with preferred shares that helps.
Sorry, I'm still here. I'm as I said, I have been quite unwell, so sorry if I'm going off camera.
I'm so sorry about that.
I think those returns are tremendous. Obviously, there is a higher risk level with VC than, say, in the market, so I can protect myself with options and things like that. So I can always get my money out very quickly if I needed to. And I presume that you would have a much longer holding period. It's the same thing really with private equity. I think that you can make some really great returns, and especially if you can start to use leverage, that can work quite well. I think for me, I've started to look at some VC stuff here in Australia and a little bit in the US, largely because of the tax incentives. I mean, in Australia, some of the startup things will say you get an immediate 100% write-off, plus you get 100% write-off on all your profits. And in some cases, I've seen some investments where they'll give you a 200% write-off your investment. And it's like, well, okay, that sounds enticing. But, you know, I'm sort of always reminded of the don't invest just because of a tax benefit. So, look, I'd love to be a little bit more involved in the VC space. I guess I just haven't dipped my toe in that water yet.
Yep, but we also know where the space is because Dr. Azar is in that space. And in our space, we're out of time. So we want to thank our special guest, Shakeel Latimer. And at the end of this, you're not going to see me because I'm running clips. It's new technology, so some of it works, some of it doesn't. So I'm going to try to send it to you guys, but I can't be assured. But it will be on TikTok, Instagram, including our regular distribution channels, which are LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Roku, and of course, Amazon Fire. We'll see you next week on VC Masters. Take care. Bye-bye.
Shakeel, I hope you feel better.
I go anywhere with you, 'cause you fill my mind, or you fill my mind. We could build a dream, start up something new, and the world is on your shoulders, and you feel like falling over. Just let